The story of human history is filled with empires rising and falling, with revolutions and wars, with discoveries and tragedies. And to understand one of the most complex and fascinating chapters, we must dive deep into the story of how nations, leaders, and ordinary people shaped the modern age, beginning centuries ago when societies were still dominated by monarchs, religions, and traditions, where power was concentrated in the hands of kings and emperors, yet always challenged by new ideas, new inventions, and the restless spirit of human ambition. For history is not a straight line. It is a storm of events, each influencing the next. So let us begin. Centuries ago, when Europe, Asia, and the Middle East were connected by trade routes, by conquest, and by the spread of ideas, in the East, great empires like China's dynasties thrived, perfecting administration, philosophy, and technologies such as gunpowder. While in the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire expanded across 3 continents, controlling trade routes and serving as a bridge between worlds. In Europe, kingdoms were fractured by feudalism, yet slowly transformed by the Renaissance, which revived classical knowledge and inspired exploration. Artists, scientists, and thinkers questioned old assumptions. And this led to the age of exploration, when figures like Christopher Columbus, Vasco da Gama, and Ferdinand Magellan crossed oceans in search of wealth and glory. Their voyages reshaped the world, bringing new continents into contact, creating empires, but also spreading diseases, slavery, and conquest. In the Americas, great civilizations like the Aztecs, Mayans, and Incas fell to European conquerors, their temples destroyed, their peoples enslaved, yet their legacy endures in the cultures and bloodlines of millions. Africa too was torn apart by the slave trade, as millions of men, women, and children were forced into ships, crossing the Atlantic in brutal conditions, feeding the economies of Europe and the New World. It was a time of immense cruelty, but also of resilience, as enslaved peoples preserved their traditions, songs, and spirit even in bondage. While in Europe, the wealth of colonies fueled revolutions in thought, sparking the Enlightenment, when philosophers like Locke, Voltaire, and Rousseau argued for liberty, equality, and reason. These ideas inspired revolutions. From the American Revolution of 1776, which gave birth to a new republic, to the French Revolution of 1789, where kings were dethroned and the people demanded rights, blood ran in the streets of Paris. But out of chaos came a new vision of society. Yet not all revolutions were peaceful, for soon Napoleon Bonaparte rose from the ashes, conquering Europe before finally meeting defeat at Waterloo in 1815 across the Atlantic. The United States grew rapidly, expanding westward, clashing with Native American tribes whose lands and ways of life were systematically destroyed. While in the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution transformed the world. With steam engines, factories, and railroads, people left farms for cities, economies shifted. Empires grew stronger, and nations like Britain built vast colonial holdings across Africa and Asia, ruling over millions. But empire always bred resistance. And across the globe, independence movements took root. In India, leaders like Gandhi would later inspire non-violent resistance, while in Latin America, figures such as Simon Bolivar led armies to free nations from Spanish control. By the 20th century, the world was poised for catastrophe. Nationalism, militarism, and alliances dragged nations into the First World War, a brutal conflict fought with machine guns, trenches, and poison gas. Millions died, empires collapsed, and maps were redrawn. Yet peace proved fragile. The Treaty of Versailles punished Germany, sowing seeds of resentment. As the Great Depression gripped the world, extremist ideologies rose: fascism in Italy and Germany, militarism in Japan, communism in Russia, leading inevitably to the Second World War, the deadliest conflict in human history. Adolf Hitler sought domination, unleashing blitzkrieg across Europe, while Japan struck at Pearl Harbor, bringing the United States fully into the war. Battles raged from the deserts of Africa to the snows of Russia, from the Pacific Islands to the skies over London. Millions perished in the Holocaust, one of the darkest chapters of human cruelty, yet the Allies fought back. D-Day, 1944, began the liberation of Europe. And in 1945, with the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, The war finally ended, but peace did not mean harmony. For soon the Cold War began, dividing the world into two camps, the United States and its allies versus the Soviet Union and its satellites. Nuclear weapons threatened annihilation. Proxy wars erupted in Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. Spies and propaganda shaped minds, yet science and technology leapt forward. Satellites orbited Earth, humans walked on the moon, medicine advanced, and nations rebuilt. Meanwhile, civil rights movements demanded justice. In America, African Americans marched for equality. In South Africa, apartheid was challenged. In Asia and Africa, colonies won independence. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, and Jawaharlal Nehru symbolized the fight for dignity and freedom. As the 20th century closed, the Soviet Union collapsed, ending the Cold War. Globalization spread. The internet connected people like never before. Economies boomed and crashed. Terrorism emerged as a new threat. Wars in Iraq and Afghanistan marked the early 21st century, while climate change loomed as humanity's greatest challenge. Yet through all of this, one constant remained: the fierce determination of people to endure, to fight, to adapt, and to imagine better futures. History is thus not only about kings and battles, but about farmers, workers, mothers, children, inventors, dreamers, and rebels who refused to bow to fate. From the rice paddies of Vietnam to the factories of Manchester, from the deserts of Egypt to the skyscrapers of New York, their struggles and triumphs weave the fabric of our shared past, reminding us that every age, no matter how dark, produces voices of hope, courage, and resilience, and that the story of humanity, though filled with conflict, is also filled with progress, creativity, and an unbreakable spirit that ensures the future will always remain unwritten, waiting for us to shape it.